As you know, it's quite a challenge for academics to only talk for 5 minutes, and so this could be interesting. But one of the things that, as an academic, we get the opportunity to be the fly on the wall sometimes in organisations. So I'm going to be talking about 2 case studies that I've been working with a team looking at. What we've done is gone into 2 medium-sized to large organisations and done 7 interviews in each. These were long interviews, and I can't tell you who the organisations are because we signed confidentiality agreements with them. But we talked to the CEO, to the chair, to board members and to senior staff. When we had done all these interviews, they were all typed up and transcribed and de-identified and all those wonderful things that we do, and we did a thematic analysis, and then we went and had a look what the literature said about all of these things. But we also tried to understand these 2 organisations by comparing them to each other. There were a whole range of differences between the organisations, how much money they had, what recent history had done. One of them had just had a major crisis. They, of course, had different people. They were operating with different approaches to their budget, and the organisational culture in the 2 organisations was actually quite different as well. The CEO in both organisations was male. One had far more power and influence over the organisation than the other, and we thought that on the basis of what we had found out, that this was largely due to his personality and style, but also his influences perhaps to do with how long he'd been there. Board turnover in one was almost nil. There was no need for there to be renewal of the board in their constitution. The other one had a sunset date for people's terms. And the one that had no turnover also had no real process for board evaluation. They weren't looking at what they were doing as a board. We had also commercialisation as themes that emerged. One was, both of them were moving to a more corporate commercial approach, as everybody is doing. But in terms of differences, there were differences in the board management relationship that I'm just going to talk about a little bit now. So between the 2 boards, we actually found that one had what we called an hourglass approach to communication between the board and the organisation. The hourglass approach was where the CEO actually had a grip on every communication, backwards and forwards. Nothing went one direction to the other without the CEO being involved. Now that meant that all communication was vetted between the board and the staff, and that although there was no preclusion of staff attending board meetings, they would give their report and then leave. So strict communication control rests with the CEO. There's an iron grip on the communication between the 2 parts of the organisation. In the other organisation, we labelled this accessible communication. So there was communication around the CEO, not always through the CEO. There were protocols in place so that the CEO knew what was going on. It wasn't that there was secret whispers going on, but that this communication around meant that the board members were encouraged to visit sites and be part of what was going on in the organisation, and that accessibility was seen as being a key to communication, that this was a relationship between the organisation and the board that wasn't controlled in the middle. So we then started looking at what the risks were. Now, of course, in terms of the hourglass, this is a risk because all the communication is controlled by one person. That person, therefore, has the opportunity to filter communication. Staff, if they've got concerns, have to go to the CEO, and that knowledge is all vested in the CEO. But accessibility, and when there's accessibility, you've also got potential for multiple versions. You can actually get ambiguous communication. You can get blurred lines of communication, and there's a dispersed knowledge. Someone over here might know something that someone over here doesn't necessarily know. The benefits, of course, with the hourglass, it's clear, you know who you're supposed to talk to, the CEO is responsible for decisions being implemented, there's one version, and that knowledge is vested in the CEO, who then shares with the board and the staff. With the accessible, there's multiple lines. This can actually be good. There's checks about what someone said to who, when, etc. There's an open opportunity for staff to alert the board of concerns, and there's dispersed knowledge of operations, so if the CEO isn't there, other people know what's going on. So the question for you is, do you want this or do you want this? And part of the reason for having a look at that is to think about, okay, well, why would you end up with this? Some of you will be familiar with the Carver model of board governance, which everybody talks about. The Carver model says that strategy and operations should be separated. and that separation is managed by having the CEO at the middle as the line between the two parts of the organisation. So if Carver is the way that you're going, you need to be thinking about, okay, what's going to work about the hourglass shape or not. Agency theory, however, says the CEO is the agent of the board managing the organisation, and you must have a trust-mistrust relationship. You have to give enough trust to the CEO for them to do what they need to do, but you have to mistrust them enough to have checks and balances in place to make sure they don't do what you don't want them to do. Questions for you then to discuss are, is there a best way? And then at your organisational level, how do you determine what is best for your organisation? Thank you very much.